Hi, and welcome back to Movies Explained, where we recap your favorite movies for you. Today, we will be recapping a movie about a psychopath killer which hunts people with his chainsaw. So without further ado, let's begin. A boy named Jedediah with a saw in his hand, and his face covered by a mask of the Joker, in disheveled clothes kills multiple people who come to his house in a countryside. One day Jed tries to kill a girl, but her friend saves her and takes her to the hospital. Police is informed about the attack and Sheriff alone comes to their house and asks Jed to surrender. A man comes out of the house with a gun in his hand and says that Jed is only protecting their house and family and informs that there are many people in the house with guns in their hands, but Sheriff asks for the boy again. One of them says that they should probably give him the boy, but the other one denies and says that he is family and they cannot abandon him like this. Meanwhile, Sheriff gets a backup and the family then decides to hand over Jed to the police. Meanwhile, a bunch of people comes there with guns in their hands. Sheriff asks them to stay away, but they do not listen to him and tries to ignite a fire in the house. As a defense, the family starts firing on their cars. All of the family members are killed with bullets and fire catches their whole house. At night, the people come back in search of the dead bodies, and one of them, Kevin, sees a child crying with a lady. They both are left alive. She asks him to help, but he takes the baby from her but hits the woman with his feet. She expires at the spot and he gives the baby to her wife Arlene. Heather is working in Superstore, cutting meat when she hears a ring and goes to see who is there. She meets her friend Nikki there and Nikki tells her about the boy she hangs out with and says that he is very cool and that she likes being with him. Heather laughs and she says goodbye to Nikki. Heather then goes to her home where she lives with her boyfriend Ryan and she tells him about Nikki and the new guy she is dating. Meanwhile, she gets an envelope stating that her grandmother has died 3 weeks ago and she has inherited a house which was owned by her grandparents. She says to Ryan that she has always thought that all her parents and grandparents are no more. She goes to Gavin and asks him why he has not told her that they are her foster parents. Arlene starts yelling at her that they always wanted to have a child and they have not done anything wrong and tries to emotional blackmailing her by saying that are not they good enough for her. Heather says that she has not said anything like that, but she just wants to know from where she has come from and where she belongs. She leaves in anger and says that they are done. She goes to her house and says to Ryan that she wants to go to Texas. Heather then notices Nikki and her boyfriend Kenny there and Nikki says that Ryan has invited them and that they will go with her to Texas. They all go to Texas in a van, partying, and they decide to stop at the petrol pump and suddenly, Kenny hits a boy with his van on a petrol pump. Ryan asks him his name and where he is headed to. He tells him that his name is Daryl and that he is headed to Texas. Ryan says that they can help him if he wants to and he agrees and sits with them. They reach Texas and see the gate of her inherited house. Meanwhile, a car stops by and a man in suit comes out of it. Heather greets him by calling Mr. Farnsworth and thanks him for coming all the way from Dallas. He says that he recognizes her by her car and he can do anything for her grandmother. Mr. Farnsworth hands her over the keys of the house and a letter from her grandmother. She asks Mr. Farnsworth how he has found her. He starts laughing and says that she was never lost. They all come inside and see a mansion. They see the rooms one by one and Heather sees a graveyard and comes there and sees her grandmother's grave. They all then go to get some things from the store, but Daryl asks them to let him stay there. After they leave, he comes inside and starts stealing valuable things from there. In store, Nikki flirts with Ryan and he warns her that it was just a one-time thing when he cheated on Heather with her, so Nikki should stay in her limits now. Daryl looks for a locker which should have all the money and gold. He looks the whole house and sees a door in the kitchen. He enters and sees another door, so he opens the door and sees the darkness inside. He switches on the lights and sees a big door down the stairs. He opens it and sees many cartons there and also sees a glass of juice and bones there in a plate. He sees an iron door and tries to open it. But even after many attempts, he cannot open it, but suddenly, a man comes out and kills him with a hammer in his hand. Outside the store, Heather meets a boy Hartman in a police uniform and he just talks about here and there. Heather meets Sheriff there and he asks where she lives, so Heather tells him that she has inherited Carson's house and he says that if he could burn that house again, he will. Hearing that, Heather gets terrified and goes away from him. They reach home and see that Daryl has taken a lot of stuff from in there, but they soon forget about it and plan to have a good dinner. At night, Heather goes upstairs and sees the pictures hanging on the wall. She sees a picture of her mother and recognizes her. Meanwhile, Kenny cooks in the kitchen when he sees the door in the kitchen and says that there is a butler's pantry in there. He sees the open door to the basement and gets downstairs and sees the keys hanging to a door and calls Daryl. If he is there, he looks here and there when he sees a man with his face covered in with a mask. Kenny runs from there and that man follows him. Kenny screams, but nobody listens to him because of the loud music, and then Kenny is taken up by that man and he kills him. Nikki comes to Ryan, crying, and says that something bad happened and he should probably see that. Ryan runs with her and she takes him to the stable where she has wine and glasses there and says that she wants him. On the other hand, Heather goes to her grandmother's room and sees her stuff. She then goes to a study room and sees her grandmother's dead body on a couch with a glass of wine on her side. She becomes terrified and runs to the others. She calls Ryan and tries to look for him but cannot find him. She hears some noise from the kitchen and goes to see Kenny there. She sees a man standing in a red shirt with a mask on his face who also has a cut hand in his hand, and he is cutting his fingers one by one. She tries to run from there, but he runs after her and catches her by her neck. He throws her to a side and she gets hit by the table and loses her consciousness. When she wakes up, she sees the man standing on a distance with a saw in his hand, cutting the body parts of a human. She becomes terrified and starts crying. He starts cutting Kenny with a saw and Heather runs away from there. The man with saw follows her and she falls from the stairs and gets injured. She then again gets up and runs to the graveyard. She tries to hide herself in a grave, but that man comes there and Heather starts sobbing and that man starts cutting the coffin. Ryan and Nikki see the smoke and hear the screams and come there. They see that man with a saw and start running away from him. The man with saw follows them, but Ryan locks the door of the stable and that man starts cutting the door with his saw. They take the guns from the stable and Nikki fires at him. After some moments, the stable door gets hit by a van. It is Heather inside the van and she asks them to get in the van as soon as possible. They escape from there but see the front gate locked, so they are unable to pass that gate. Their car dies off and Ryan tries to start the car again and again but sees the man with saw following them there. The gate opens after some time, and as soon as they leave the gate, the car's wheel is cut by the saw and their car crashes some meters ahead. Ryan dies at the spot and Heather and Nikki gets out of the car and the saw man follows them and breaks the mirrors of the van. Both Heather and Nikki start screaming and he turns over the car and tries to kill Nikki. Heather gets out of the car and starts screaming at the saw man. She starts running and the saw man follows her, but she goes to a jungle and after crossing it sees a carnival there. The saw man follows her and people get scared to see him, so people starts running, but he keeps on following Heather. The police boy Hartman, whom Heather has met earlier, sees that and runs towards her. The policeman asks the saw man to leave her alone. He sees him and tries to hit him with his saw. The policeman dodges the saw and that man runs away. Heather is taken to the police station and a policeman, Bert, sees the van in a terrible condition and reports to sheriff that there are no victims in it, but it has fresh blood in it. Bert sees blood on the grass that makes a passage to inside the house and he follows the blood and reaches the basement. On the other hand, Hartman goes to meet Heather and Heather asks if they have found Nikki yet, to which he replies that they are not able to find her yet, but they will find her. In the police station, Heather sees old newspapers and sees the news when her family is killed and burned down, and she also sees the pictures of burnt bodies of her ancestors. Bert video calls her head and shows him the blood, dead bodies, and cut body parts. He sees a freezer and opens it where he sees Nikki, but he shoots her in anxiety. When he is about to leave, he is also killed by the saw man. After seeing Gavin and Arlene in pictures, she finds that they were also included in the group who burned her family. Heather leaves the police station and calls Mr. Farnsworth and tells him that all of her friends have been killed. He then asks her to meet him and she goes to see him and asks why he has never told her about anything beforehand. He says that the saw man in basement is her cousin Jed. Sheriff comes there and tries to get her, but she runs away, and on the road, she is hit by a car. A man, Ollie, comes out of it and she recognizes him from the picture. Ollie tries to grab Heather, but she hits him and runs away. Hartman sees her and asks her to let him give her a ride, but later betrays her. Heather gets to know that he is the son of Sheriff and she demands him to let her get out, but he takes her to the slaughterhouse as his father orders. The police officer calls Bert, but the saw man hears the call and gets to know that Heather belonged to Carson's. He opens the cupboard, which has a lot of saws in it, and he takes out one of his saw and heads towards the slaughterhouse. Mr. Farnsworth goes to police station and complains the police officer that Carson's granddaughter is missing and he just saw her in a police car some moments ago. The police officer checks her location and runs to get there along with Mr. Farnsworth. In the car, Heather asks the young boy if he is Hartman. He nods and she tells him that she is a Sawyer and hits a knife in his car seat. He takes her to the slaughterhouse and ties her with strings and tapes her mouth and then goes outside. The saw man comes there and is about to cut her, but he sees the birthmark on Heather's chest. Seeing the mark, he cuts her strings. Meanwhile, Sheriff and Ollie come there and start beating him. Sheriff says that he will destroy the Sawyer bloodline today and puts chain in Saw Man's neck. Ollie starts the machine to tighten the chain around Saw Man's neck, but Heather manages to kill him with a rod. Heather then throws the saw machine to her cousin and Sheriff starts fighting with him. Heather hits Sheriff by a rod and he turns back to kill her, but meanwhile Saw Man cuts his feet and he then throws him in the saw machine. The police officer gets there, but Heather asks them not to shoot. They don't shoot him and tells them that they have to clean everything. Heather and his cousin go back to the house and she gives him a damp cloth to clean his lips, which are bleeding. He goes to his basement and marks the people he has killed from the picture while Heather reads her grandmother's letter that states everything about Jed. She reads it and then goes to see him in the basement and locks him in there. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching, and if you liked it then please consider liking our video and subscribing to our channel. We will see you in the next one.